You all know how excited I get for any new tools that are built specifically for people who love books. And I'm thinking the one we're talking about today is going to be a big hitter in the future. It may even replace something that so many of us use on a pretty regular basis. So let's talk about the Storygraph. Hello, WordNerds! Happy Tuesday! Today we are talking about a new app in the world of books. I came across some people talking about this on Twitter, I think around the end of last year, and I've been super obsessed with it ever since. I've been a little back and forth on whether I'm going to replace pretty much my main reading tool with this one, but so far I'm leaning towards a very big, excited yes. So let's talk a little bit about the Storygraph, which was built to help you track all of the books you want to read, all of the books you have read, your reading preferences, figuring out what books you haven't found yet that may be a perfect fit for your reading preferences. So the app is the Storygraph. It is the new kid on the block, but it does a lot of what Goodreads has been doing for so many of us for so long, but with a lot of really cool, interesting features, not only available right now, but on the horizon. There is so much potential for this in the future as both a tool and a community for readers, and I am pretty excited about it. So for today's video, I wanted to take you through a little bit about how the Storygraph works, how you can get started for your own reading habit tracking, all of that fun stuff. But we also have a bit of a bonus as well, in that I got to ask a couple of questions of the Storygraph's team, Nadia, the founder, and Rob, who is doing the programming side of things. And they gave us a little bit of an extra insight into how it all came together, how it works, and where it might be going in the future. So essentially speaking, the Storygraph was a tool built to help people track all of their reading progress, whether it's books you've read, books you want to read, making all of the lists and keeping track of your favorite genres and your reading habits, all of that fun stuff the Storygraph can absolutely do. My first kind of hiccup with whether or not I wanted to sign up was that I've been using Goodreads for a really long time, years and years and years. It has tracked hundreds of books for me, all of my ratings, all of my TBR lists, which is just, I'm never going to read them all, and there's no way I'm going to be able to go back and add all of these books to a new program. But the Storygraph took care of that right off the bat, which made it so much easier for me to just jump in and give it a try. Basically, it lets you upload your entire Goodreads history into their system, including all of your ratings and your lists and the books you want to read, and when you last read them, all of that, it takes care of it, which made it so much easier to just dive in and start looking around. After that, if you're fairly familiar with how Goodreads works, you should be pretty comfortable jumping around the Storygraph, adding books to new lists, keeping track of what you're currently reading, all of that. If you haven't been using Goodreads, it is still super intuitive. You can just kind of look up whatever book you are interested in learning more about, or telling the system that you have read any of that stuff. You look it up, you change the status on it, you can add some extra details if you've read it before, kind of giving the Storygraph system a sense of the pacing and what kind of story it is, but we'll get a little into that a bit later. So when you first sign in, you'll find yourself on the Find a Book page, which is essentially the home page. You'll see a list of the books you're currently reading, a list of your TBR pile, and then some personalized recommendations right at the top if you're not sure what it is you want to read next. The Storygraph is constantly learning from your own reading preferences, from a survey that you can fill out to tell it specifically what kind of books you like, to give you a sense of what books you might enjoy in the future. And it is really, really smartly built, and I'm super impressed with the recommendations so far. So the Storygraph is absolutely worth checking out just for that alone, because there are so many books out there, and I'm always worried that I'm just going to miss something that I'm going to absolutely love that could have been my new favorite book, and I just won't have read it because there are too many books and too little time. The next tab over is the Reading Challenges tab, where you can set a yearly reading goal, much like you do on Goodreads, where you're figuring out how many books you want to read over the course of the next calendar year. But it does get more interesting than that. You can go into the Reading Challenges directory and find other more specific challenges that fellow readers have set up, or even set up your own. One of the challenges featured on the homepage right now is the Brandon Sanderson Challenge, where a bunch of readers have challenged themselves to read everything Brandon Sanderson has ever written, and that is honestly pretty cool. And you can find all kinds of different challenges on this page, by genre, by variety, by page count, all of that fun stuff. Or you can dream up your own and challenge other readers to join you. The next tab over is the Community tab, which is essentially what is going on in the wider world of the Storygraph. You can see what people are rating books, which books they want to read, generally their reviews, how they've liked it, all of that fun stuff. It's a great way to get new books onto your radar that you might not have otherwise. You can track just your friends or the entire community. It's great either way. And then finally, you have the Storygraph tab, which gets really exciting if you're a giant data nerd like I am and just want to know everything about your own reading habits, because the Storygraph knows it. For example, the Storygraph can tell me that I mostly read fiction books that are mysterious, adventurous, and emotional, because of course I do. So you can look at various different reading stats for yourself and the kinds of books you like over various time periods. Like it can tell me I've mostly read books that have an adventurous mood so far in 2021. Or that half of the books I've read so far this year are more than 500 pages. Another thing it could do, and I thought this one was really cool, was compare your entire history as a reader to all of the books you want to read. Or I'm sure you can change up some of those time periods, but basically it can tell you that in my history as a reader, for as long as I've been using Goodreads, the Storygraph, etc., tracking all of my reading, I've mostly read YA books, but most of the books on my TBR list, which as I've mentioned is pretty extensive, are mainly fantasy books. So as I'm shifting as a reader, getting into more adult titles, leaning a little heavier into fantasy, it's all right there for me to see on the Storygraph, which is really cool. I can also click through to any of those stats and just see a list of the books that it is featuring. Overall, it's just a really interesting way to learn more about yourself as a reader and to discover new books along the way. So now let's jump over to our interview with the Storygraph's team and find out a little bit about them and where this wonderful tool is headed. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us here on the WordNerds. I am so excited for everything I've seen about the Storygraph so far, so I can't wait to learn a little bit more about it. To kick things off, I'd love to hear a little bit about how the Storygraphs came to be. Is it safe to assume you're a reader? How did this project first get inspired?
Hi, I'm Nadia, founder and CEO of the Storygraph. Yes, I am indeed a reader. I've been reading since I was little, mainly inspired and encouraged by my mum. In terms of what inspired me to start the Storygraph, I'd always loved reading. And for a few years, I'd had a small side project that would help people to track and share reading lists. And at the beginning of 2019, I found myself with a lot of runway from a previous business and this idea. And so rather than getting a new job, I decided to focus on this side project. And I had a lot of fun. And I knew from that experience that I needed to work on a books product. But through showing an early version to a few people, I realized that product on its own wasn't going to be substantial enough. And so I just started doing lots of research at that point, figuring out if there was a gap in the market. And that's when I ended up on recommendations and finding books based on your mood. And just since then, I've been working on this idea, iterating on it, and it's developed into what the Storygraph is today.
So it definitely sounds like dreaming big has been a big part of the process so far. Have there been any surprises along the way?
What have been any interesting surprises? I think the biggest surprise for us so far has been the massive user spike we had in June of 2020, where after some tweets about us were super popular, we grew from about 1,000 to 20,000 users in the space of 3 days. It was a very wild, overwhelming time. Rob, my co-founder, and I had to learn a lot about how to operate at that scale. And even though we've had other spikes since then, and we're now at over 130,000 users, that first spike will always be the most memorable. We learned a lot, we persevered, and we made it through to the other side.
So when a new user first signs up, they get to fill out a reading preferences questionnaire to tell the Storygraph a little bit about the books that they like in order to get personalized recommendations. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Hi, my name is Rob, co-founder of the Storygraph, and I do all the machine learning on the site. The thing I work on that you probably see and interact with the most is the book recommendation system, and specifically the reading preferences survey. So if you think about how you get book recommendations in real life, maybe you go down to the library and talk to their book experts, or maybe you ask your mom or your dad or a close friend who knows what you like. How does that conversation go? Do you read the last 100 books that you've read and give a thumbs up and thumbs down on each one? Or maybe you give them the star ratings of 0 through 5 on the last 300 books? Probably not. You just talk to them. You express, these are the type of books I like, these are the type of books I don't like, and hopefully you get a good recommendation out of it. Now that's more of what we're trying to build in the Storygraph with our recommendation system, because we believe that the current recommendation systems out there in the world are antiquated and inflexible. The future of recommendations is through AI, and the easiest, most natural way to communicate with AI is simply by talking, telling the AI what you want. And that's what our reading preferences survey tries to accomplish. So if I look at my survey, the first question is, from the AI to me, what are your favorite genres? I respond business, economics, mystery, science fiction, and thriller. Next question is, what are the kind of books you like to read? I respond with personal finance, future technology, artificial intelligence, investing, money, computers, and machine learning, and a few other things. tell me some characteristics you appreciate, tell me some things you're never in the mood for. We have about 6 or so questions there. And within a few seconds of hitting submit, you will get your live recommendations from our site. And the first book that came up when I had my first reading preferences survey, for me personally, is The Fear Index by Robert Harris, which is an interesting one. So I'm just going to read the blurb here and tell me if you think this, or tell me how you think this fits with the preferences that I gave the AI. So first, The Fear Index by Robert Harris is a fiction and mystery. It's a fiction and mystery thriller. And this is the blurb. His name is a carefully guarded secret from the general public, but within the secretive inner circles of the ultra-rich, Dr. Alex Hoffman is a legend, a visionary scientist whose computer software turns everything it touches into gold. Together with his partner, an investment banker, Hoffman was developing a revolutionary form of artificial intelligence that tracks human emotions, enabling it to predict movements in the financial markets with uncanny accuracy. His hedge fund, based in Geneva, makes billions. But then, in the early hours of the morning, while he lies asleep with his wife, a sinister intruder breaks the elaborate security of their lakeside house. And so begins a waking nightmare of paranoia and violence as Hoffman attempts, with increasing desperation, to discover who is trying to destroy him. That sounds right up my alley. When I saw that and I said, I realized that the Fear Index, the title of the book, is actually something I'm familiar with, something the investment community is probably familiar with. The VIX, it's actually called the Fear Index. It measures how scared or how fearful the current market is. And as soon as I read that blurb, it really clicked for me. I said, wow, I'm going to love this book. And I read this book and it was one of my favorites. Now, this is not the type of book that you would expect to get as a recommendation from a machine. This is the type of book that at least I, anyway, would expect to get from a human, especially based on the quick little survey that I filled out. That's really what we're trying to accomplish at the Storygraph, because we believe that the future is AI, very AI heavy, and the future is conversational. And we don't think that there's anything on the market currently that really captures that vision that we're trying to do with book discovery and specifically recommendations in machine learning.
And finally, is there anything you can share with us about future plans for the Storygraph?
So in terms of what you can expect from us in the future, I'm hard at work. Nadia is hard at work, working on new features, trying to bring machine learning and other aspects of book discovery to the masses in a way that works well, that we don't see on the market right now. The next thing that I expect that you'll see from me is both similar books and personalized similar books. So let me pull this up. Yep, so let's say you're on the book Star Wars and you want to see books that are similar to it. That's pretty easy. A bunch of websites have that. Click on similar books and it shows you some things. But personalized similar books uses machine learning to rank those similar books by the books that we think you are going to like the best. So if I'm on Star Wars and the system, the AI knows I love video games, it might show me Mass Effect as a similar book. But if you love young adult stories, it might show you Ender's Game instead as a similar book to Star Wars. And the goal is for no two people to see the same similar books when clicking that button, because no two people are the same. And we think that if we're trying to find you the next best book for you, it needs to be unique.
Awesome. So there you have it. Another huge thank you to Nadia and Rob for stopping by to answer some of our questions. If any of you are considering checking out the Storygraph, I absolutely recommend that you do, and have left a link in the description section down below. And of course, don't forget to join us on Sunday for our next live chat. This one's going to be a write-in and is starting right at 7:30 Eastern time. So hopefully we will see you all there. In the meantime, happy reading, happy writing, and I'll see you next time.